Hi, everyone. Ariana Friedlander here with Rosabella Consulting, and welcome to the Co-Creators in Conversation interview series, where we celebrate leaders who are challenging the status quo and creating economic value by genuinely caring about their people. Right now, I am really excited to be speaking with Alison Daley, not co-founder, just founder and CEO of Recruiting Innovation. Welcome, Alison.
Thank you, Ariana. Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, it's so wonderful to have you. I'm so excited to share your story, especially as a fellow Misfit. I was wondering to start, if you could introduce yourself to our audience by saying a little bit about what you do at Recruiting Innovation.
Sure. I am the founder and CEO of Recruiting Innovation, where we offer the online tech recruiter certification program. We are helping to sort of elevate the tech recruiting industry from being a piecemeal, stab in the dark, try to get there to the finish line industry, to providing methodical technical training specifically from technical experts about what they do so that recruiters are more effective in engaging with them. I also, in addition to the training, we also have a talent grant that is designed to bring underrepresented people into the tech recruiting industry. And it's a 5-month program where they receive the tech recruiter certification and mentorship and connection into opportunities into the industry. So it's a mission-based company, but overall we're helping recruiters and sales teams learn how to talk tech.
Nice, that's awesome. And I haven't heard of or seen a business like yours before. It's exciting to see because I've done a lot of work within tech, and there's often a disconnect in the way technologists speak and everyone else. And so
That's
it's
right.
cool to see you're intentionally bridging that gap. The need seems obvious. And I'm curious, like, how did you get here? Like, what happened in your past that led you down this road?
Oh, well, it's definitely been a colorful journey, I will say. I call myself the accidental recruiter. I have fallen into the industry 4 times. I've picked it 3 times. The current iteration is the 3rd time. I'm just like a dyed-in-the-wool extrovert. And the first ad I ever responded to after getting my bachelor's degree in English was an admin assistant posting for what turned out to be a staffing firm. And I got the job, and that's why I was like, this is even an industry? That's crazy. And just one thing after another kind of landed into the work. And then it wasn't until I was in my last recruiting role at a high growth startup here in Denver that I kind of basically burned out. I'd been in the industry for 10 years. Didn't really like the way the tech recruiting market had been going. As an industry, recruiting has always been sort of a throw them in the deep end, let them figure it out kind of industry, sink or swim scenario with a 30% attrition rate on average as an industry. And, people are used to just making it work. And around that time was when these blogs started coming out about how they hate technical people hating recruiters and that we don't know what we're talking about. And it's like, that's kind of true because, until I came along, no one was really focused on translating or teaching recruiters how to talk tech. But it wasn't until I actually had a, pretty rough meeting with my last boss and just realized that, I didn't have an opportunity to grow in that position. And I never had really actually grown in any of my positions in recruiting. I've never been promoted. Most of my roles were maybe a year and a half to 2 years. Like, people like me, I delivered good work, but I always kind of like bumped into walls and just the way my personality is, I'm not a command and control type, and recruiting was under HR, and HR is very much a command and control type environment. And so my bosses never saw me and them and me. And so anyway, I was just like, I'm done with this place. What do I want to do? And I decided that I wanted to pivot into user experience research. I used to be a dedicated UX research recruiter. And so I always was living vicariously via these candidates who had both an analytical and creative job. And lucky for me, I happened to stumble upon online boot camp out of Berlin that was like on its 2nd cohort ever of UX design. So it was a boot camp for UX designers. It had the perfect timing of starting 2.5 weeks from when I discovered it, so I could give in my 2 weeks notice. Did that, quit my job, pivoted into the program, actually landed a job pretty much right away as a junior researcher. Like the week that I was out in my new program, I was actually on a panel at Denver Startup Week around hiring your first UX designer. And one of the panelists had said, I wish there was boot camps, but then for UX. And I was able to say, well, there is, and I'm starting one. And someone was in the audience that day and knew me. And so they called to offer me the job. So I know that was just so lucky, but also I'm a recruiter, so my network is good. And basically, you know, my student project for the program became what ultimately is recruiting innovation. So originally my idea, the product was around UX recruiter training, and it was called whatthehellisux.com. I own the domain and everything.
Nice.
Really focused on using the tools of user experience to sort of, you know, methodology like journey maps and personas to sort of think through how would you teach recruiters about roles or, you know, workflows. And one thing led to another basically. And 9 months into my role as a researcher, I just started looking in the market and was like, is no one out here solving for the problem that recruiters don't talk tech? Like we all know this is a problem. Mm-hmm. No one was doing it. I, at this point, figured out the training model using the UX methodology to teach recruiters a systematic way to talk to their candidates. And it's just like this aha moment of like, you know, if not now, when? And if not me, who? And so basically, once I had the idea and really did crack the code that UX methodology would be a perfect training toolkit for recruiters, it wasn't not going to happen. Like I feel 100% compelled to bring this thing to life, and just hit my 5-year mark. And we just launched the 2.0 of our training, and we're up 2.5x from last year. And I finally feel like I really have a stable ground to stand on. It's been a long journey, but you know, it wasn't until I left recruiting, went into another industry, and then when realized that some of the secret sauce in that other industry was actually the missing link for where I'd come from, and merging those two things has been really a really exciting journey, and it delivers a really useful product. Yeah.
I love that story. And especially how you said, you know, you were on one side of it, then and as a recruiter, and you saw these problems in the recruiting world, and then you went into UX research and, you know, kind of kept bumping up against the same problems, but also had a new lens.
Exactly.
Seeing things, and you applied that lens to starting this business, recruiting innovation, which is something you said you just couldn't not do.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, at the end of the day now at this point, like the recruiting industry is everything for me. I love this industry. I really believe in the people that work in this industry, and, you know, people deserve good training and, you know, having confidence and having companies invest in them. And so I really feel like, especially with the market right now, it's really, the demand for recruiters is really high. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of like the right time as well for us to say, hey, you know what? Recruiting isn't like a nice to have function. It is a critical business unit. So let's invest in the people in these teams and let them be more successful, which makes literally everyone involved more successful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that I just love businesses that recognize the value of their services and rising the tide, right? And we all rise together with that mentality. And that's part of what I hear you embracing. And also I hear that there was like kind of throughout your experience as a tech recruiter, were you always a tech recruiter, or were you also recruiting for other positions? I'm just curious.
Originally I started off as a generalist. Yeah.
Okay.
You know, I worked on staffing. I was also worked for Foot Locker Europe out of their European headquarters in the Netherlands. So that was, you know, every kind of retail position. Right. And then I think I really started finding my spot once I became a UX recruiter, and then I worked for a high growth startup. That was really when it was like, tech is my jam now. And that's how that transition happened.
Okay, cool. So it wasn't like you started out there, but you moved into that and saw something you liked, but you also described things that just didn't fit for you and didn't work for you, that there weren't opportunities for advancement, that there wasn't support to succeed. I'm just curious, like those experiences and seeing this need, take us back to 5 years ago, happy anniversary, but take us back to like 5 years ago, and what was going through your mind that helped you see not only this need, but the belief in yourself that you could fulfill this need?
Oh man. Yeah, it's funny because like when I was really, you know, crystallizing the training model using the UX methodology, I actually was going to some of the coding boot camps in Denver and practicing the storytelling process and using journey maps and little personas. I actually used Fraggles, like the different Fraggles for the different UX roles. And to just
Are those like Fraggle Rocks? Like I have
yeah, exactly.
in my head. Okay, cool.
So like the grandpa Fraggle was the UX strategist, and then Red was the researcher because that was me, and then the guy with the little hat was the visual designer. Yeah, total dorky, but it worked. And just see the dev students, right, who might not even understand the whole software development process. They've just signed up for this boot camp. They're changing their careers, and to just see them like eat it up. And they're like, can we become UXers? And just realizing that I was really being able to demystify this process. It was like, the market needs this. This market needs this. And so, you know, when I launched the business, so 1 year into the UX recruiting research role, I had left that role to come back and save recruiting, right? And I got some high aims, I guess. But it was interesting because my sort of alpha into the market was this tech recruiter conference that I launched 4 months after I had my last day, my last W-2 employment. And I had no list. I've never hosted an event. I had no brand recognition, right? I was just like hobbling this thing together, and one thing in front of the foot in front of the other. And, you know, on one hand, I realized like, holy cow, oh my gosh, I actually can do a lot of things because as a recruiter, you're kind of like pigeonholed into what you can do, especially in my case. And so for me to suddenly think about the concepts and the designs and the messaging and the emails and the flyers and like having to do all of it by myself helped me spread my wings in a way that it was almost like no one in my career had given me the opportunity to expand my responsibility. And so it's almost like I had to create an opportunity to give myself that responsibility. And so I really just grew in that way. And then at the same time, also, it's like such a roller coaster. And I would just like, you know, be typing at home and like crying while I'm typing. It was so much stress. Like, what am I doing? And I just remember saying at one point to my husband, like, it's such a roller coaster. And he like comes by and like rubs my back. And he's like, at least it's your roller coaster. And I was like, yeah, that's a framing I can work with. That's right. I've been on plenty of other people's roller coasters, and now at least it's mine. So
I love that. I totally relate to that. I know my husband, a few years into me starting my business, called me an entrepreneurzilla. And I just thought that was so funny. I was never a bridezilla. Like that just wasn't me, but I totally, you know, had just that roller coaster ride, in my own ebbs and flows with that would be projected out onto those I love, for better or for worse.
Oh man.
And
it's everyone's journey. Your partners, like when I'm working hard, my partner's working hard because he's holding it down at home. That's for sure.
Totally. Yeah. And I love what you recognized for, you know, what gave you that confidence to step out was almost like this dabbling, and then dabbling some more. Like, oh, I started to demystify UX research and what that role is. And it was landing for people. And then I'm going to start doing this thing, and, oh, I have this event lined up and I have to deliver. That really drove you to starting to do these things that were never present challenges for you in the roles you had before. But, you know, as an entrepreneur, we suddenly wear a million hats, not just the one. And it can be easy to not embrace those hats unless we have something kind of forcing us to.
Yes. Yeah. And I will say too, it was interesting because in the conference was like a live delivery of the training model. And I had like friends in the different technical roles, like live action deliver their story and their workflow. And then we workshop their sort of junior versus senior career progression and personas. And, you know, it wasn't like all I had my eyes set on was this conference. And then the feedback from the conference, which I broke even on, which was a miracle. But the feedback was, we loved hearing from technologists. We loved hearing about their work, but we want to go deeper. And I hadn't thought past the conference. And then out of nowhere, a friend introduced me to a friend that was an online curriculum designer. And I kind of was like, oh, universe. I mean, I think sometimes when we're just really open to change is coming, what is it, that things just kind of line up. And then that person helped me realize, okay, maybe I should just bring this content online. And that's how, you know, then it crystallized from there. But it was like, I didn't need to know totally where I was going. I just knew that it had to be done. And I was open to the journey unfolding as it did. Obviously, I'm steering the boat, I'm rowing, but it's sort of like you have to ride the rapids a little bit and see where you end up. especially in this entrepreneurial journey, that's for sure.
Right. Yeah. And some of that goes so counter to, have it all figured out and dialed in with a massive business plan and just know it all when you get started. Don't dabble until the end game, or have your exit strategy or whatever. And what you're describing kind of runs counter to that. And I know in my own business, I started 10 years ago. It'll almost be 11 years, which is crazy. When I started really ideating it, and I had it all quote unquote figured out in my head, I thought, and on paper too, a little bit. But I learned before I even launched publicly that there was no one that would pay me for the services I had in mind. And so, like, even when you think you have it all figured out, the reality doesn't always match that expectation. And you did yourself such a service by just taking it one step at a time and being open to what you were learning and internalizing those learnings. Because I think that false belief that you have it all figured out can limit openness to learning and gaining insights from customers in the market and meeting an actual need instead of fulfilling a dream.
Amen. I will say, right around the time when I was like, okay, well, I guess I bring this thing online, the first thing I did was ask a few friends for a coach recommendation. I was like, because where my brain is as an employee and kind of like a disempowered employee at that isn't going to be the person that's going to build a very successful business. I'm going to need to break out of the last 10 years of my career and sort of actively create who I'm going to become. And I think, recognizing that I wasn't going to do it alone is a reason that I was able to sort of lift my head up and be willing to just get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Like, if you need black and white, don't start your own business because everything is ambiguous. You'll scrape, you'll hand to mouth, you're going to figure it out. But anything worth doing, you will not stop at the first setback. It's just putting on that ability to really dive deep, be uncomfortable, and get help has been the reason it went past even just an idea.
Yeah. Well, and that awareness too for yourself of, oh, I need a coach. I need to bring somebody in, because the person that made me successful as an employee is not going to make me successful as an entrepreneur. I think that that's such a powerful self-awareness to act upon, that just also, again, opens you up to new possibilities that enable you to succeed that might have been limitations if you didn't ask for that help before.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, that is, I think you used the word humble or humility before, but it's it's being willing to say, I'm going to do something. I'm going to be not very good at it, but guess what? There are people around me that have done it and want to give advice. And, you and I had talked about this before, but ultimately picking on something that I had to make it. I couldn't not make it. And I loved it so much. And what I was learning was so much, but when they say you better be passionate about the problem that you're trying to solve, it's not a joke, because there are dark, dark days and you'll end up so deep in that you can't go back. And so then how do you keep going forward? And it's because you have to have that higher calling and that bigger, reason.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I so often, when I'm struggling, especially in my journal, will reflect on, what is my sense of purpose here, and relating it back to the why, why I am on this journey is always what gives me the gumption to continue that, and some really good self-care, right? It's not like I can just power through because of my purpose or my why. I can't. I don't think any of us really can. I think some of us just have a different lag time, right? Between when the powering through begins and when our bodies or whatever says stop. But that self-care along with that sense of purpose really helps me. And I know, you've brought in coaches, you've gotten help. You're clearly willing to step in and learn from others, to take classes, and that's so awesome. And I know one of the things that we talked about before was just kind of questioning or reimagining what it means to be a successful entrepreneur. And so I'm wondering, take me through what that was like, because sometimes we encounter those classes or those coaches that pin us into being a successful entrepreneur requires these 5 steps. And that doesn't feel true. So what was that like for you, finding your way and reimagining what it means to be a successful entrepreneur and working with other people supporting you on this journey?
Yes. Well, that's also something, I mean, especially now that I've, the 5 years under my belt and I've been galvanized through the fire a few times. But, it's not even just like mentors or coaches, it's just society and telling us, a successful entrepreneur is late 20s, white male, questionable hygiene. They're going to raise $50 million and then they're going to have a 250 person company plus an IPO. Like that's what we all equate with, at least in my circles or whatever. And thinking that would have to be my thing. I think I've at least 3 to 4 times now I've started the process of maybe I should fundraise, and then just stopping halfway through, realizing like I have a 4% chance. As a white woman, I only have 4%, let alone if I was a woman of color, that I would get any capital. Things are changing a little bit now, but like having to just be like, you know what, I have to count on myself because no one is going to bet on this idea. Or at least I thought so. Right. And there's that self-limiting belief as well. But like, having gone through the fire enough and like come out on the other side and things just keep getting better and stronger. My message is better. I'm stronger. I had to grow. I had to become the entrepreneur that I could be rather than just what I was told to be. And I think that, as I reached out to my network and my network went from like recruiting and sales network to like fellow entrepreneurs and other people building businesses, like there's more than one way to be successful. And I think that that's something I want to talk, I would like for us all to start talking about is there's a million ways to be successful. You don't need to have a 200 person team. You don't need to fundraise. You don't need to IPO. You don't even need employees. Like if you are doing good in the world and you're paying your bills and you bring, goodness to who you interact with, like that is success. And on the other side, you have someone like Sarah Blakely, who just like is crushing it at Spanx, and the gal at Bumble just went IPO. So like it's like a nice moment where we are seeing like the archetypical women now doing those big, big things. Right. And also vast networks of women that are doing it their own way and making a difference. And, just realizing that you can define for yourself what being a CEO looks like. And I think that was the hard thing. I'm still working on it, but like decoupling the idea of, well, maybe if I fundraise, then so-and-so will have respect for me or whatever. And it's like, who cares what they think, honestly? They're not right. They didn't get it before. Who cares if they get it now, honestly? It's so, the people that get it already, Right?
It's so interesting to hear you say that, because I feel that too, that it's easy to go down that like line of thinking of, if this, then that, and to couple, especially if I do this, or if I achieve this, then so-and-so will respect me or value me, and it's such a really like just demoralizing stance to take, and I know for myself, one of the things that was so important to learn, and I'm still really learning to embody, right? I feel like we learn things intellectually and then we actually learn them in embodiment and in practice, and it doesn't happen at the same time, is recognizing that I gain inspiration outside, but validation comes from within, and I think as an entrepreneur and maybe as a woman too, right? We're so trained to like appease all the time that we want affirmation of others or validation from others, and it's so it's such a slippery slope,
Oh man, I can even feel my stomach and anxiety just sort of like fluttering just thinking about that thought. That is so true. And like the idea of external things versus internal things, and like really, I mean, if we're going to talk about this, like the beginning of last year, I landed my first licensing client. So it's like a global enterprise training firm that wanted a tech recruiting partner. And so I got to partner with them. And that was sort of like the cash injection that helped like bring me around to launching Fully 2.0. But I still remember I was calling it coming out of my COVID chrysalis. Like, I think we're all in some form of like death and rebirth. Like if quarantine was anything, it was a forced yin period, right? Where we stop actioning, we stop going, we stop achieving, and just like melt, dissolve, and just like let yourself mourn, right? And then fertilize the ground, and then you can replant some seeds to grow out to who you're supposed to be the next round. And like, I was coming out of my COVID chrysalis and, you know, changing my hair and getting my clothes ready because I was going to refilm this class for this big client, and like nothing quite was vibing. And it was really like a tough moment where it was sort of like, I do all these nice things and then it's not working out. And it was just like, because that's the outside part. And it wasn't until like I pushed through that part and really like delivered these amazing classes that turned out so awesome with like really great people around me that just brought this vision to life, that it was like, then I could see that it was me, right? It was almost like I had to do it before I could see it, if that makes sense. And so
the proof is in the doing.
Yes. Yeah. So it's almost like being willing to just like, I don't know, break it all down and dissolve it and blow it up almost so that you can like really till the soil and come out the other side, the next level of you.
And I always find too, that there's this component of like, the way to figure it out is to do the work. Like if you wait until you have it figured out to do the work, you'll never have it figured out, because there's something in the doing, right? With purpose and intention, not just the achieve, go doing, right? But that like creative, you know, experimentation, I'm going to just give this a try and see what happens type of doing that leads to things being clarified and codified and receiving, you know, a sense of direction and insight that just as a thought exercise, these things don't occur.
Yeah, I listened to, there's a great woman named Cara Lowenthal. She has a podcast called Unf Your Brain. I don't know if you can say the F word on your show, but
I don't care.
She talks about thought work and stuff. And she's one of the things, she's really, really fascinating to listen to. Her coaching program's awesome. But she talks about like, actually, it's the journey that is what's transforming you and not the outcome. So like if you're consistently doing negative self-talk as you exercise and lose weight, guess what? You're still going to feel negative about yourself even when you hit your ideal weight. So like really letting the journey of being like, wow, I'm just going to be figuring this out and I'm learning. And that was actually a mantra for a very long time, is thank you, challenge, for this opportunity to grow. And then I'd be like so sufficient. What's that word?
I'm not sure.
Like, oh, look at how much I'm learning.
Right. Yeah.
This is a way to like joke about it. Cause it's like,
Oh, facetious. Is that what you're saying?
Facetious. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Facetious. They'd be like, oh, look at how much I'm growing. So I'd like be going through such difficult times.
Yeah. But I know one of the
makes
things,
it fun.
Yeah. One of the things I said recently to one of my mentors was, when I was struggling with something, you know, well, and the gift I see in this and the gift I see, and I didn't realize I was using that language until she mirrored it back to me. And she goes, you know, Ariana, what's just amazing is you keep talking about this challenge as a gift. That's fantastic. You know, and it's like, we don't celebrate those things for ourselves necessarily unless, you know, we have someone to help us recognize that growth and recognize that development and that shift in the self-talk, right? From, oh, why don't I ever get it right? What's wrong with me? You know, those types of things, which have been part of my inner critic diatribe, to, oh, well, the gift in this challenge is, and to look at it that way. And it's not that it takes the pain and the hurt away. Like, right. It's still going to be the roller coaster ride. There's still going to be the ups and downs. Rejection is still going to hurt and all of those things. And we can grow from it with, I think, more grace and ease when we see it that way than when we just kind of like squash ourselves down because, oh my gosh, I did it again. What's wrong with me?
Well, and that's like establishing that as a, you know, the learning mindset, like fall again, fall better, you know, it's like you get back up. And so, and that's the thing too, is like having gone around a few times now with vendors or people or the product or myself, it's sort of like when rough things happen, it's an opportunity to catalyze and get clear. And it's sort of like things come up and you can either keep doing what you've always done and continue having the same result, or being like, hey, wait, this is an opportunity to practice what I said I wanted to do. So let me practice this new thing, whether it's time management or cutting out toxic people or refining your product or integrating user feedback. Like, seeing each one as an opportunity to either accept or reject, right? You don't have to just say, universe gave it to me, I have to accept it. It's like, you know, anything that's like a thought process of like, how true is this for me, is like a good exercise. And the faster you can do that, the quicker you're able to make decisions and be more decisive in your business.
I love that, especially that question of how true is this for me? You know, that relates a little bit to Katie Byron's work, the work. You know, like, is this true? Can I absolutely know it's true? And I think that we assume our thoughts, the stories we're telling ourselves, are a capital T truth. That's, you know, just not, you can't question it. And actually you can, and it doesn't have to be. We give it power by believing it, instead of sitting back and reflecting on it and asking, like, how true is this? You know, and can I be the entrepreneur that I see and admire? Not necessarily the right successful entrepreneur, but like, oh, the way they're growing their business, I admire, and I want to aspire in that vein with my own flavor.
Exactly.
You know, we're always growing and moving towards something. And this has been so fun. I feel like we could just talk forever about this, and, you know, definitely sparked so many ideas for me. I also want to make sure that, you know, we're at time. It's crazy how fast it's gone by. And I want to hear, like, what does co-creating mean for you? What does that look like at Recruiting Innovation? Because I'm always curious how that looks. That's the name of the series, is Co-Creators and Innovation. So give us or Co-Creators in Conversation. So give us an idea of what that looks like for you at Recruiting Innovation.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, being like a 10 out of 10 extrovert, like that was actually one of the first really, really, really hard things for me, was to work by myself quietly in my house for a long time. Like, yeah, I would borderline soul crushing, honestly, if I'm going to be frank about it. And it was like when I really recognized, hey, you know what, I'm going to just need to fully update my network. And so I used to network to look for candidates or look for clients. It's like, no, I need a network to find other entrepreneurs, right, other women in tech, other, you know, women entrepreneurs. Like, I have to get help. I can't be in this cave by myself. And so like I started just, and like fortunately in Denver and Boulder, there's a lot of networking groups. And so I just started enmeshing myself into some places and being really open to meeting a couple of people, meeting more people. I'm a recruiter. I can't not be that way. And then it's been cool too, because I met a woman at Startup Week right as I was quitting my job. And she became my sort of entrepreneur wife, because she had just started a business the year before. And the two of us met a couple other ladies who are entrepreneurs. We ended up creating like a power circle where we would meet once a month, and we became each other's board, basically. And that was huge for each one of us, really. And a year later, to just see how different everyone was and their business was 12 months later. And then co-creating, I mean, I know my specialty at this point is like the vision. So I have, you know, I'm a hands on the rudder. But then like the idea of my skill set is really being the spider in the web, where I pull all the loose things together into something cohesive and beautiful. But I work with the people that are talented in their areas, and I give them a vision to work on. And so it's sort of like, I wouldn't have gotten here if it wasn't for these awesome people around me that were able to do the parts of the jobs that I knew I couldn't do. And then to see this outcome of this result of the synergy, it's almost like an alchemy. And it's almost undescribable to have like an idea, like literally a thought, and then a compulsion, and then like action, and then a result. And it's just like, wow, I'm a solopreneur, but like it took 20 people to get here with me in many different capacities, plus like the other 20 plus friends that are just like cheering me on in the back, you know. It's like, yeah. So even as a solopreneur, I'm co-creating every day. It's really, really awesome.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. It can feel lonely, but it isn't something that occurs in a vacuum either.
Like lonely, but not alone.
Yeah.
You know, sort of thing. Because at the end of the day, also, that's what it's like with entrepreneurial life, is you don't have a boss to blame. You don't have an executive to blame. Like, it's you, right? And like, yeah, maybe a vendor drops the ball, but were you managing them well enough, right? Like, and so in terms of like that loneliness, like, I think that that's where the real growth happens, is our ability to like look in the mirror and be like, what can I do differently next time? Or why does this feel not so good? And what do I need to do differently? And yeah, the level of self-growth that I've been going through in the last 5 years building this business is astounding. And yeah. So as much as you have people around you, ultimately it's your own journey as well. But it's cool that the people that come into your orbit are vibrating at the frequency that you're at. And so the more you can clean up and get clarity and have intention, the more the clarity of the people come around you. And it's really symbiotic.
Yeah, for sure. That's beautiful. I love the examples that you gave around co-creating, just both as an entrepreneur and building that community and support structure, and also as a creator of a product and a service that brings in people to complement your expertise and turn the vision into reality. I think that was so well put. And I'm wondering if listeners want to get in touch with you or learn more about recruiting innovation, what's the best way for them to do that?
Sure. Check out our website, recruitinginnovation.com. So you can learn about our Tech Recruiter certification program. You can also learn about our talent grant. And then if you want to find me, you can, of course, find me on LinkedIn. It's Alison with one L, Alison, Daley, Daley.
Awesome.
And then you can email me at Alison@recruitinginnovation.com.
Great. And we'll, of course, include those links in the show notes. And thank you so much, Alison, for coming on to Co-Creators in Conversation, for sharing your story, and to our listeners for joining us today as well. It's so great to have you here. I hope you gained some insight from this conversation. And if you can even just identify one thing that you learned from this conversation that you are going to act on, that would be great, because we need to start taking insight and inspiration and make it actionable for real growth to happen. And of course, if you like this conversation, feel free to share it with friends. And you can also check out more interviews at rosabellaconsulting.com. So thank you again, Alison, and thank you to our listeners.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise. Take care.